The slap echoed through the executive floor like a gunshot. My palms stung, but not as much as the rage burning through my chest. "You disgusting pervert!" I screamed, loud enough for every employee on the 15th floor to hear. My new boss, Vincent Kane, stood frozen, his hand on his reddening cheek, eyes wide with shock. Behind him, the conference room door was open, revealing what I'd just discovered. Security footage playing on the large screen, time-stamped from 3 nights ago. Me, working alone in my office at 9 p.m., completely unaware of the camera angle that had been adjusted to focus directly on me. Not my work, not my computer screen, just me. "Ms. Brooks, I can explain," Vincent started, his voice carefully controlled. "Explain? Explain?" I was shaking now. "You've been watching me, recording me. There are cameras in the women's bathroom." That last part wasn't confirmed yet, but I'd found the requisition order on his desk. 27 hidden cameras, ordered 2 weeks before I started. The entire office had gone silent. People were emerging from cubicles, drawn by the commotion. Vincent's face had gone from red to pale. "That's not what this is. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, and everyone else is about to understand too." If only he'd known what would happen when I found that footage. If only he'd realized I wasn't the type of woman to stay silent. 6 hours earlier, I'd walked into Titan Dynamics for my first day as senior operations manager, excited and nervous. It was a huge career move, a 40% salary increase, and a chance to work for one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the state. Vincent Kane, the CEO, had personally recruited me. During the interview process, he'd been professional, impressive even. Harvard MBA, 15 years of industry experience, a reputation for building innovative companies. Nothing had seemed off. "Welcome to Titan, Daphne," he'd said that morning, shaking my hand in his corner office. "I have a feeling you're going to be a perfect fit here." "Thank you, Mr. Kane. I'm excited to get started." "Please, call me Vincent. We're informal here. Collaborative culture, open doors, all that." He'd smiled, and I'd smiled back, thinking how lucky I was to work for someone so approachable. He'd given me a tour of the facility, introduced me to key team members, and explained my responsibilities. Everything seemed normal, professional, perfect. Then I'd been shown to my office, corner office, glass walls, nice view. "We believe in transparency here," Vincent explained, gesturing to the glass. "No closed doors, no secrets, keeps everyone accountable." I'd thought it was about modern management philosophy, open workspace, collaborative environment. I didn't realize it was about something much darker. My coworker, Jessa, stopped by around 11 a.m. "Welcome to Titan. Need anything?" "Just trying to get oriented. This place is amazing." She smiled, but something flickered in her eyes. "Yeah, it's something. Hey, word of advice? Don't work late alone. Always make sure someone else is here." "Why?" "Just trust me on that one." Before I could ask more, she was gone. The rest of the morning was standard onboarding, IT setup, HR paperwork, system access. By afternoon, I was diving into operational reports, getting a sense of the company's projects and challenges. Around 4 p.m., I needed to print something from Vincent's shared drive. He'd given me access for operational documents. That's when I saw the folder. It was labeled Security, Monitoring, Internal, and dated from the past 6 months. Curious about what security protocols the company used, I clicked it. What I found made my blood run cold. Hundreds of video files, each labeled with dates, times, and names. Female names. I recognized some: Jessa, Whitney, Camila, others I'd met that morning. Heart pounding, I clicked on one at random. It was security footage from inside the building, but the angle was wrong. Instead of showing the full office space, it was zoomed in on a woman working at her desk. The camera tracked her movements as she stood, stretched, adjusted her clothes. This wasn't security footage. This was surveillance, targeted surveillance. I clicked another file. Same thing. A woman in a conference room. The camera angle focused on her, Not the meeting. I felt sick. How many of these were there? I scrolled through the folder. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Then I saw a subfolder labeled New Hires. My stomach dropped. Inside were files dated from the past week, the week I'd been hired. I clicked the most recent one, dated yesterday. It was footage from what looked like my future office, empty but clearly prepared. The camera angle was adjusted, zoomed, focused on where my desk chair would be. He'd been planning this before I even started, before I'd set foot in the building. This wasn't random. This was systematic. I sat staring at my computer screen trying to process what I was seeing. Vincent Kane, respected CEO, Harvard MBA industry leader, was running a surveillance operation on his female employees. But why? Was this some kind of sick voyeurism? Was he selling the footage? Was it blackmail? I needed more information. I clicked into another subfolder. Special Projects. Inside were documents, contracts with a security company for custom camera installations, floor plans of the office with camera locations marked, and then I found it. An email thread between Vincent and someone named Jay Torres discussing premium content and subscriber base. They were selling it. Vincent Kane was secretly filming his female employees and selling the footage to some kind of subscription service. I felt like I was going to be sick. These women had no idea they were being watched, recorded, distributed to strangers on the internet for profit. How long had this been going on? How many women had been victimized? I grabbed my phone and started taking photos of everything, screen after screen of evidence, the folder structures, the file names, the email threads, the contracts. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone steady. Then I heard footsteps. Daphne? Everything okay? Vincent was standing in my doorway, that same friendly smile on his face. You've been quiet this afternoon. Just wanted to check in. I minimized the window, trying to keep my expression neutral. Fine. Just going through operational reports. There's a lot to absorb. Take your time. No rush. Hey, I noticed you're still here. Most people head out around 5:30. You don't need to impress me by working late on your first day. Was that a warning? Was he making sure I wouldn't be here alone? Wouldn't discover more? Actually, I was just about to leave. Great. Walk out together? I had no choice but to agree. That evening at home, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those file names, those camera angles, those women being watched without their knowledge. I had evidence on my phone, but what should I do with it? Go to the police? But Vincent was wealthy, connected, powerful. Would they even believe me? Go to HR? HR worked for Vincent. They'd cover it up or fire me for accessing files I shouldn't have seen. Go to the media? That could work, but it would also make me a target. I thought about Jessa's warning that morning. Don't work late alone. She knew. Maybe not the full extent, but she knew something was wrong. How many other women suspected but were too afraid to speak up? I made a decision. Tomorrow. I was going back to that office and I was getting every piece of evidence I could find. Then I was going to burn Vincent Kane's entire operation to the ground, but I needed help. I called my best friend Nora, who worked as an investigative journalist. Nor, I need your help with something. It's big, and it's bad. How bad? Secret surveillance of women in the workplace, footage being sold online, systematic operation involving multiple victims over months or years? Silence. Then, are you serious? Completely serious. I have evidence, but I need to know how to handle this properly. If I screw this up, he could destroy the evidence and disappear. Don't do anything yet. Let me make some calls. I know people who handle this kind of thing, law enforcement who specialize in cybercrimes and exploitation. They'll know how to preserve evidence and build a case. How long? Give me until tomorrow afternoon. Can you hold out that long? I'll try. Daphne, be careful. If this guy realizes you know, he could be dangerous. After hanging up, I looked at the photos on my phone. Hundreds of files documenting Vincent's surveillance operation. This was going to destroy him. It had to. The next morning, I went into work trying to act normal. Vincent greeted me cheerfully in the lobby. Day 2. How are you feeling? Good. Ready to dive deeper into operations? That's what I like to hear. Actually, I wanted to show you something. Come to my office? My heart rate spiked, but I followed him. His office was massive, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. He gestured to a chair. I've been thinking about your role here. You're clearly talented, and I want to make sure you're positioned for success. Thank you. Which is why I'm giving you access to some additional systems. Executive-level access, actually. It's unusual for someone so new, but I have good instincts about people. He typed something on his computer, then turned the monitor toward me. It showed an admin panel for the building's security system, full access to every camera in the facility. I want you to help me review our security protocols, make sure we're compliant, efficient, all that good stuff. Think you can handle it? He was giving me access to the very system he was using to surveil people. Was this a test? Was he trying to see if I'd notice what he was doing? Or was he so arrogant he thought I'd never figure it out? Absolutely. I'll start reviewing it today. Perfect. Oh, and Daphne, this access is confidential. Don't mention it to other employees. Security protocols are sensitive, you understand? Of course. I left his office with my hands shaking. He'd just handed me the keys to his entire operation. Either he was incredibly stupid, or he was setting me up somehow. Back at my desk, I logged into the security system with the admin credentials Vincent had given me. The full scope of his operation became immediately clear. 43 cameras throughout the facility. 27 of them had been repositioned or adjusted within the past 6 months, all focusing on areas where female employees worked, changed, or took breaks. The bathroom camera requisition I'd seen wasn't speculation. It had been approved and installed 3 weeks ago in the women's restroom on the executive floor. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and sharp. This man had violated dozens of women, and he'd just given me evidence of all of it. I spent the morning documenting everything through the admin system: camera locations, adjustment timestamps, footage, storage locations. I couldn't access the actual footage without leaving digital footprints that Vincent might trace, but I could document that it existed and where it was being stored. Around noon, Nora texted, "I have contacts. 2 FBI agents specializing in cyber exploitation. They want to meet with you tonight. Can you do 7 p.m.? Yes. Where? She sent an address. A coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment. Professional, but private. Bring your evidence. And Daphne? Don't let anyone know you're meeting with them. If your boss gets tipped off, he could destroy everything." Understood. I worked through the afternoon, playing the role of enthusiastic new employee while internally I was documenting every aspect of Vincent's operation. Around 4 p.m., Jessa stopped by my office. She looked nervous, glancing around before speaking. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" We went to a small break room on a different floor. Jessa closed the door and turned to me, her expression serious. "I need to tell you something about Vincent, about this place." "I'm listening." "I've been here 2 years. When I started, everything seemed great. But about 6 months in, I started feeling watched. Like someone was always observing me. I thought I was paranoid." "You weren't paranoid," I said quietly. Her eyes widened. "You know." "I know." "I found the surveillance files yesterday." She sat down heavily. "I've suspected for months, but I didn't have proof. And I was scared. Vincent is powerful, well-connected. If I accused him without evidence, he'd destroy my career." "How many others know?" "I'm not sure. I think several women suspect, but nobody talks about it openly. We just warn each other. Don't work late alone. Be careful in the bathrooms. Watch what you wear. We've all adapted our behavior to try to protect ourselves. That's not protection. That's survival under threat." "I know, but what else could we do?" I looked at Jessa, seeing my own rage reflected in her tired eyes. "We can stop him. I'm meeting with FBI agents tonight, but I need your help." "FBI? You went to the FBI?" Jessa looked terrified and hopeful simultaneously. "Through a friend who's a journalist. They specialize in cyber exploitation cases." What do you need from me? Documentation of how this has affected you, any evidence you have of suspicious behavior, and testimony, if you're willing. I'm willing. I'm so tired of being afraid in my own workplace. Do you know any other women who might be willing to come forward? Maybe. Let me reach out carefully. If Vincent hears about this before you're ready... I know. Be discreet. We have one shot at this. That evening, I met with FBI Special Agents Dominic Walsh and Kira Santiago at the coffee shop Nora had indicated. They were professional, focused, and took my evidence seriously. "This is substantial," Agent Walsh said, reviewing the photos on my phone. "You've documented a systematic surveillance operation with apparent intent to distribute footage commercially. Can you stop him? We need to move carefully. If Kane realizes we're investigating, he could destroy evidence. We'll need to obtain warrants for the servers, seize the footage before he can delete it." "How long will that take?" Agent Santiago leaned forward. "We can expedite this given the severity, but we need more than administrative screenshots. We need the actual footage files, server access logs, financial records showing he's profiting from this. I have admin access to the security system. He gave it to me this morning." Both agents looked surprised. "Why would he do that?" "I think he's either testing me or he's so arrogant he doesn't think I'd figure out what he's doing." Agent Walsh nodded slowly. "Can you access the actual footage storage from your admin account?" "I think so, but it would leave digital footprints showing I accessed it." "That's okay. We'll work with that. Here's what we need you to do." The plan was risky, but necessary. The next morning, I'd use my admin access to enter the security system and access the footage storage servers. I'd download a sample of files, enough to establish the pattern of surveillance and prove the footage existed. The FBI would monitor remotely, documenting my access as part of their investigation. Then they'd move in with warrants to seize everything before Vincent could destroy evidence. "The moment you access those files, we need you out of that building," Agent Santiago emphasized. "Kane will see the access logs. He'll know someone's discovered his operation. It could get dangerous. What should I do?" "Access the files first thing in the morning. Download what you can to a secure drive we'll provide, then leave immediately. We'll have agents positioned nearby. If Kane confronts you, stay in public areas and call us immediately." They gave me a secure USB drive with encryption software. "Everything you download goes on this. Don't use the company network to transfer files. He could intercept it." That night, I barely slept. Tomorrow, I'd either stop a predator or paint a massive target on my back. Maybe both. The next morning, I arrived at work early, 6:30 a.m., before most employees. Vincent's car wasn't in the parking lot yet. Perfect. I logged into the security system with my admin credentials, navigating to the footage storage servers. My hands were shaking as I accessed the file directory, thousands of video files organized by date, camera location, and subject. Subject. That's what he called the women he was surveilling. Subjects. I inserted the encrypted USB drive and started downloading files, sample footage from multiple cameras, multiple victims over several months, evidence of the systematic nature of his operation. The download progress bar crept forward. 23%, 34%, 51%. Come on, I whispered. 67%, 78%. A notification popped up on my screen. Access detected. Admin console. User V. Kane. Vincent was in the system, and he could see what I was doing. My heart hammered. The download was at 89%. I needed just a few more seconds. 92%, 95%. Another notification. Camera access. Your location. User V. Kane. He was watching me. Right now. Through the office camera. 98%, 100%, download complete. I ejected the USB drive and shoved it in my pocket just as my office phone rang. Vincent's extension. I didn't answer. Grabbing my bag, I headed for the door. Vincent was standing in the hallway, blocking my path. "Leaving so early? You just got here." "I forgot something at home. Be right back." "You accessed the surveillance footage." His friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. That's above your authorization level. You gave me admin access to review security protocols, not to download confidential files. Confidential files of women being secretly recorded? That kind of confidential? People were starting to arrive for the morning shift. A few employees lingered in the hallway, sensing tension. Vincent lowered his voice. My office. Now. We need to discuss this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I know what you've been doing. I know about the surveillance, the footage sales, all of it. His face hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. And making false accusations against your employer is grounds for immediate termination and legal action. Legal action? That's rich coming from someone who's been committing federal crimes. He grabbed my arm, hard. My office, now. That's when I slapped him. Hard, across the face, loud enough to echo through the corridor. Get your hands off me, you disgusting pervert. Every employee in the hallway froze. Vincent's face went bright red, from the slap and from rage. You just assaulted me. You grabbed me, and you've been sexually exploiting your employees for months. You're a predator. The executive floor had gone completely silent. Every single person was staring at us. Vincent looked around at the audience, realizing the situation was spinning out of his control. Everyone back to work. This is a private personnel matter. Private? I laughed bitterly. You've been secretly recording women in this building and selling the footage online. There's nothing private about your crimes. Jessa appeared from a nearby office. It's true. I've been documenting suspicious behavior for months. Another woman, Camilla, stepped forward. The camera in the women's bathroom. I found it last week. I've been terrified to say anything. More women emerged from offices and cubicles, 5, then 10, then 15, all watching Vincent with expressions ranging from shock to rage to grim satisfaction. You've all been recorded, I told them. Hidden cameras adjusted to surveil you, footage stored on company servers. He's been selling it to subscribers. The crowd's energy shifted. What had been confusion became fury. Vincent tried to regain control. This is slander. I'll have you arrested for defamation, for hacking company systems. Hacking systems you gave me access to. Systems containing evidence of your federal crimes. I pulled out my phone, not to use it but to make a point. The FBI is already involved. They're reviewing everything right now. That was a slight exaggeration. The FBI was ready to move, but Vincent didn't need to know the exact timeline. His face went from red to pale. You're lying. Am I? Want to bet your freedom on that? The elevator dinged. 4 people in professional attire stepped out, led by Agent Walsh and Agent Santiago, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Vincent Kane? Agent Walsh held up his badge. FBI, we have a warrant to search these premises and seize electronic evidence related to an ongoing investigation into cyber exploitation and illegal surveillance. Vincent looked at me, then at the agents, then at the growing crowd of employees. His entire world was collapsing in real time. I want my lawyer. That's your right. But first, we need to secure the servers before any evidence can be destroyed. What happened next unfolded quickly. FBI technical specialists swept through the building, identifying and imaging every server that contained surveillance footage. Vincent was escorted to a conference room for questioning, his lawyer called and on the way. The employees, especially the women who'd been surveilled, were interviewed by agents. Many were crying, others were furious, all were processing the violation they'd experienced. I gave my formal statement to Agent Santiago, providing the encrypted USB drive with the footage samples I'd downloaded. This is exactly what we needed, she said. Combined with the server seizures, we have enough to prosecute. You did the right thing coming forward. What happens now? We'll analyze all the footage, identify every victim, trace the distribution network, and build a comprehensive case. Kane is facing multiple federal charges: illegal surveillance, wire fraud, possibly sex trafficking depending on how the footage was distributed. Will he go to prison? If we can prove everything we suspect? Absolutely. For a long time. Outside the conference room, Jessa found me. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. "You did it. You actually stopped him. We stopped him. You and everyone else who was brave enough to come forward. I've been working here for 2 years, feeling watched and violated and scared. And you've been here 2 days and you burned his whole operation down." I just couldn't stay silent. More women approached. Some thanked me. Others shared their experiences. A few just wanted to be heard after months or years of suppressed fear. We'd all been victimized, but at least now there would be accountability. Around noon, Vincent was led out in handcuffs. His lawyer was protesting the arrest, arguing about warrants and proper procedure, but the agents had followed every protocol perfectly. As he passed me in the hallway, Vincent looked at me with pure hatred. "You destroyed me." "No, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it." The story broke that evening. Tech CEO arrested in massive workplace surveillance scandal. Within hours, it was national news. Nora's journalist contacts had been given background information, and they'd run with the story hard. The details were damning. 43 cameras, dozens of victims, months of systematic surveillance, footage sold through encrypted subscription services. Vincent's company was finished. By the end of the week, Titan Dynamics had filed for bankruptcy. Investors fled, clients canceled contracts, employees resigned in droves. The building where I'd worked for exactly 2 days became a crime scene, then an empty shell. But the story was bigger than one company. Women started coming forward from Vincent's previous companies, reporting similar surveillance and exploitation. A pattern emerged. He'd been doing this for years, targeting vulnerable employees and profiting from their violation. Agent Walsh called me with updates. "We've identified 23 victims across 4 companies over 7 years. We've also traced the footage distribution network. Kane was making approximately $400,000 annually from subscription fees." $400,000 from violating women? More, actually. That's just what we can document. There may be additional revenue streams we haven't found yet. What's his defense? His lawyers are claiming the cameras were for legitimate security purposes, and any inappropriate footage was accidental or the result of technical errors. That's absurd. I saw the email threads about premium content and subscriber base. We know the evidence is overwhelming. His lawyers are already discussing plea deals. But Vincent apparently wasn't interested in plea deals. He was fighting the charges, maintaining his innocence, claiming he was the victim of a conspiracy led by a disgruntled employee. Me. The media attention was intense. I gave interviews to major outlets, explaining how I'd discovered the surveillance and why I'd come forward. "You were at the job for 2 days," one interviewer said. "Why take such a huge risk?" Because it was the right thing to do. Those women were being violated, exploited, degraded. Someone needed to stop it. Were you afraid? Terrified. Vincent Kane is wealthy, powerful, well-connected. He could have destroyed my career, sued me into bankruptcy. Or worse, but staying silent would have made me complicit. The interview clips went viral. "New employee takes down predatory CEO after 2 days" became a headline across multiple platforms. I received thousands of messages. Most were supportive, praising my courage. Some were from women sharing their own stories of workplace exploitation. A few were threatening, from Vincent's supporters who believed his claims of innocence. Through it all, I tried to stay focused on the bigger picture, ensuring Vincent faced justice and that his victims received support and validation. A victims advocacy organization reached out, offering counseling services to all the women who'd been surveilled. Several women filed civil lawsuits against Vincent personally, seeking damages for the emotional harm and violation of privacy. His assets were frozen pending the criminal trial. The trial itself took place 6 months later. I testified, walking the jury through how I'd discovered the surveillance operation and documented the evidence. Jessa testified about the culture of fear Vincent had created. Technical experts testified about the camera placements and footage distribution. FBI agents testified about the extent of Vincent's criminal network. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. The defense tried to argue that Vincent was merely a businessman who'd made some errors in judgment, that the surveillance was for legitimate security purposes that had been misinterpreted. But the emails were too damning. That are the premium content discussions, the subscriber base references, the intentional camera adjustments to focus on specific women. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts: illegal surveillance, wire fraud, invasion of privacy, and distribution of intimate images without consent. 23 counts total. Vincent's sentencing hearing was packed. Media, victims, advocates, all wanting to see justice served. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd reviewed every piece of evidence personally. She looked at Vincent with undisguised disgust. "Mr. Kane, you held a position of authority and trust. Your employees relied on you to provide a safe, professional work environment. Instead, you violated that trust in the most egregious way possible." Vincent's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, citing Vincent's lack of prior criminal record and his contributions to the technology industry. The judge wasn't swayed. "The systematic nature of your crimes, the premeditation involved, and the number of victims all indicate a complete lack of remorse or moral compass. You treated women as objects to be surveilled and exploited for profit." She sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison, followed by lifetime registration as a sex offender. The courtroom erupted in applause. Several victims were crying, others were embracing. All were experiencing relief that their tormentor would face real consequences. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with Jessa, Camilla, and a dozen other women who'd been victimized. 18 years, Jessa said softly. "He'll be 60 when he gets out." "Not soon enough," Camilla replied, "but at least he won't hurt anyone else for a long time." A journalist approached, asking for comment. I thought carefully before speaking. Vincent Kane spent years treating women as commodities. He violated our privacy, our dignity, our basic human rights, all for profit. Today's sentence sends a message that those crimes have consequences. But more importantly, it validates the experiences of every woman who was brave enough to come forward. The reporter asked, "What advice would you give to people who suspect they're being surveilled or exploited in the workplace?" Document everything. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And find people you can trust to help you, whether that's journalists, law enforcement, or advocacy organizations. You don't have to face it alone. Life after the trial was complicated. I was simultaneously celebrated as a whistleblower and struggling with the trauma of what I'd experienced and witnessed. The 2 days I'd worked at Titan Dynamics haunted me, the violation I'd felt discovering those surveillance files. The rage of realizing how many women had been victimized. I started working with the victims' advocacy organization that had reached out during the trial, helping develop workplace safety protocols and surveillance detection training. "You've turned your experience into something meaningful," the organization's director told me. "A lot of victims want to just forget and move on. You're choosing to help prevent this from happening to others." I can't forget. None of us can. But maybe we can use what happened to create change. We developed a training program for companies about proper surveillance practices, consent, and privacy rights. We lobbied for stronger privacy laws and whistleblower protections. The work was fulfilling in a way my previous career had never been. 6 months after the trial, I received a job offer from a national advocacy organization, Director of Workplace Safety Initiatives. It was a chance to work on systemic change, to ensure that Vincent's crimes led to meaningful reforms. I accepted immediately. My friend Nora, who'd connected me with the FBI initially, wrote a long-form article about the entire case. The woman who slapped a CEO and exposed his crimes became one of the most read investigative pieces of the year. "You've become the face of workplace whistleblowing," Nora told me over coffee. "How does that feel?" "Weird. I didn't set out to be a face of anything. I just couldn't stay silent about what I'd discovered." That's exactly why you're effective. You're not performing activism. You're just genuinely committed to stopping exploitation. I keep thinking about all the women who suspected something was wrong but were too afraid to speak up. They weren't cowards. They were rational people responding to a genuine threat. Which is why your story matters. You showed that fighting back is possible, even against powerful people. The civil lawsuits against Vincent resulted in significant settlements for the victims. His personal assets, including multiple properties and investment accounts, were liquidated to pay damages. Jessa received $800,000. Camilla received $650,000. Each victim received compensation proportional to the duration and extent of their surveillance. I donated my settlement, $1.2 million, to the advocacy organization I now worked for. "You don't want to keep any of it?" the organization's director asked. "I want it to help other victims. That feels more meaningful than personal wealth." The settlement funded a dedicated hotline for workplace exploitation reports, legal support for whistleblowers, and expanded training programs. Vincent's legal bills and settlements left him essentially bankrupt. From powerful CEO to convicted felon with no assets, the fall had been complete. Sometimes I thought about that moment in the hallway when I'd slapped him and called him a pervert in front of everyone. It had been impulsive, driven by rage and violation, but it had also been necessary. That public confrontation had given other women permission to come forward, to stop protecting his reputation and start protecting themselves. 1 year after the trial, I was invited to speak at a conference on workplace safety. The audience was hundreds of HR professionals, executives, and advocates. "Workplace surveillance is often framed as security," I told them. "But security for whom? If your employees feel watched, monitored, and violated, you haven't created security. You've created a surveillance state." I walked them through Vincent's operation, how he'd justified the cameras as security measures, how he'd normalized the surveillance culture, how he'd silenced women who questioned what was happening. The warning signs were there. Women were uncomfortable. They were adapting their behavior to avoid being watched. They were warning each other to be careful. That's not a healthy workplace culture. That's a culture of fear. "So how do you prevent this?" someone asked from the audience. "Transparency, accountability, and listening to your employees," I said. "If someone reports feeling surveilled or uncomfortable, take it seriously. Investigate. Don't dismiss their concerns as paranoia or sensitivity." I continued, "Create clear policies about surveillance, where cameras are placed, what they monitor, who has access to footage, how long it's retained. Make those policies public and enforce them consistently." "But what about employees who access sensitive systems without authorization?" another attendee asked. "How do you balance security with privacy?" In my case, Vincent gave me authorization. He handed me admin access to the system he was using to surveil people, but even if I'd accessed it without authorization, I discovered evidence of ongoing crimes. Whistleblower protections exist specifically for situations like this. After the panel, several people approached me with their own stories. An HR director whose company had discovered hidden cameras in the women's restroom, installed by a facility manager. A corporate investigator who'd uncovered an executive using keystroke monitoring to spy on employees' personal communications. A lawyer representing victims of workplace surveillance in multiple states. "It's more common than people realize," the lawyer told me. "And most victims never report it because they're afraid of retaliation or don't think anyone will believe them. That needs to change." It is changing. Cases like yours where perpetrators actually face consequences, they matter. They give other victims hope that reporting might lead to justice. Over the next 2 years, my work expanded. I consulted with companies developing surveillance policies, testified before legislative committees about privacy laws, and trained law enforcement on investigating workplace exploitation. The case against Vincent had opened doors I never expected, but it had also cost me something. The trauma of discovering those surveillance files, of realizing the extent of Vincent's violation, it stayed with me. I worked with a therapist specializing in whistleblower trauma. "You're experiencing moral injury," she explained. "You did the right thing, but you were exposed to deeply disturbing material and faced significant threats. That takes a toll." "I don't regret it," I told her, "but I can't unsee what I saw. Those files, those camera angles, knowing how violated those women must have felt. That's the burden of whistleblowing. You carry knowledge that's heavy and dark, but you also created change. Those women got justice. Other potential victims were protected. That matters." It did matter, but some nights I still woke up thinking about those file names. Subject Jessa and Subject Camilla, and dozens of others, women reduced to surveillance targets for profit. The advocacy work helped. Every training session I delivered, every policy I helped improve, every victim I supported. It felt like fighting back against what Vincent had done. 3 years after the trial, I received an email from Jessa. "Hey Daphne, I wanted to let you know I've started my own consulting firm, Workplace Safety and Privacy Advocacy, using what happened to us to help other companies do better. Would love to collaborate sometime." I smiled reading it. Jessa had transformed her victimization into purpose, just like I had. We met for coffee the following week. She looked different than she had at Titan Dynamics, more confident, more at peace. "I finally feel like I've reclaimed my narrative," she told me. "For so long, I was Vincent Kane's victim. Now I'm a consultant helping prevent workplace exploitation. That's a better story. It's your story now. That's what matters. None of this would have happened without you. You could have just quit after discovering what he was doing, found another job and moved on." I thought about it, but I kept imagining more women being hired, being surveilled, being violated. I couldn't let that continue. "You were there 2 days. 2 days, and you risked everything to stop him." Technically, I was there less than 2 days before I found the evidence. My employment at Titan Dynamics might be the shortest on record. We both laughed, finding humor in the absurdity. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found those files?" Jessa asked. "All the time," I admitted. "If I'd been less curious, if Vincent hadn't given me admin access, if I'd looked the other way, 'cause, well, he'd probably still be doing it. More women would have been victimized. But you didn't look the other way. Neither did you, or Camilla, or any of the other women who testified. We all chose to fight back." Jessa pulled out her phone and showed me a message thread. It was a group chat with 15 women, all former Titan Dynamics employees who'd been surveilled. "We stay in touch," she explained. "Support each other, share job opportunities, just remind each other that we're more than what happened to us. That's beautiful. We call ourselves the Titan survivors, and we all agree, you were the catalyst. You gave us permission to be angry, to demand justice, to refuse to be silent." I felt tears forming. I was just doing what anyone should have done. But most people wouldn't have. Most people would have protected themselves, avoided the risk, stayed quiet. You didn't, and that changed everything. That evening, I reflected on the 3 years since I'd slapped Vincent and called him a pervert in front of his entire company. It had been impulsive, dramatic, and completely necessary. Sometimes I wondered if I could have handled it differently, been more measured, more professional. But the public confrontation had served a purpose. It had shattered Vincent's respectable facade immediately, before he could manipulate the narrative or intimidate victims into silence. The slap had been satisfying, but it was the evidence that had destroyed him. The documentation, the testimony, the FBI investigation. The slap was just the opening act. The real fight had been the months of legal proceedings, the emotional toll of reliving the discovery over and over, the constant media attention. But we'd won. Vincent was in prison. His victims had received justice and compensation, and systemic changes were being implemented to prevent future exploitation. 4 years after the trial, I was invited to speak at a major tech conference. The irony wasn't lost on me. Speaking at a tech industry event about a tech CEO's crimes. Workplace surveillance is expanding, I told the audience of hundreds of tech executives and developers. You're building the tools that make it possible. Facial recognition, movement tracking, productivity monitoring, keystroke logging. All of it can be used for legitimate purposes or for exploitation. How do you tell the difference? Someone asked. Consent and transparency. If you're monitoring employees, they should know exactly what's being monitored, why, and who has access to the data. If you're hiding the surveillance, you're probably doing something wrong. But doesn't transparency defeat the purpose of security monitoring? If your security model depends on employees not knowing they're being watched, your security model is flawed. Proper security protects everyone, including from internal threats like the one Vincent Kane represented. After my speech, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous. Ms. Brooks, I think something similar is happening at my company. I found strange camera angles, and my boss keeps asking me to work late alone, but I don't have proof, and I'm scared to report it. My heart ached for her. Do you trust your instincts? I think so, but what if I'm wrong? What if I accuse someone and I'm just being paranoid? What you're describing, the camera angles and the pattern of requests to be alone, those are warning signs. Trust your instincts. I gave her contact information for the advocacy organization I worked for. Call them. They can help you document what you're seeing and guide you through the reporting process safely. You don't have to face this alone. She thanked me with tears in her eyes and walked away. I hoped she'd call. I hoped she'd find the courage to report what she was experiencing, but I understood if she didn't. Not everyone could take the risk I'd taken. Later that evening, Nora called. I'm working on a follow-up piece. 5 years after Vincent Kane. Where are the victims now? What's changed in the industry? All that. Want to be interviewed? Of course. How are you doing? Really? Beyond the advocacy work and the public persona. I thought about it. Honestly, I'm okay. The work is fulfilling. I've found purpose in what happened. But I still have nightmares sometimes, still feel that violation of discovering those files. That's normal. You experience trauma. I know, but I also know I'd do it again. If I could go back to that morning when I found those files, I'd make the same choices. Even knowing everything you'd have to go through, the trial, the media attention, the threats, especially knowing that, because I'd know the outcome. Vincent in prison, victims getting justice, systemic changes being implemented, that's worth the personal cost. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just someone who couldn't stay silent. That's not remarkable. It's basic human decency. But Nora was right that it was remarkable, only because most people didn't speak up. Most people protected themselves, avoided conflict, looked away from injustice. I'd been fortunate. In a way, I'd discovered Vincent's crimes early, before I'd been at the company long enough to feel trapped. I'd had resources, a friend with media connections, and the FBI had taken me seriously. Not every whistleblower was so fortunate. 5 years after the trial, I published a book, Watched: How I Exposed a CEO's Surveillance Operation and Why Workplace Privacy Matters. The book detailed my experience but also provided practical guidance for people who suspected they were being surveilled or exploited. It became a bestseller, particularly among women in male-dominated industries. The book tour was exhausting but necessary. At every event, women approached with their own stories. So many stories of being watched, monitored, exploited. Your book made me realize I wasn't paranoid, one woman told me. I was being surveilled. And now I know what to do about it. That's what I'd hoped for, not just to tell my story, but to empower others to recognize exploitation and fight back against it. During one book event, an older woman waited until everyone else had left. She approached cautiously. I need to tell you something. I worked for Vincent Kane 20 years ago at his first company. My breath caught. What happened? The same thing that happened to you and those other women. Hidden cameras, inappropriate surveillance. But back then there was no legal framework for prosecuting it. When I tried to report it, I was fired for performance issues. I couldn't prove anything, so I just moved on. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I've lived with that for 20 years, knowing what he did to me and being unable to stop him from doing it to others. When I saw that he'd finally been caught and prosecuted, it felt like vindication, like maybe my experience mattered, even though I couldn't stop him at the time. I hugged her. Your experience always mattered, and I'm so sorry you went through that without support or justice. You got justice for all of us, not just the women from Titan Dynamics, but all of Vincent's victims over the decades. That's powerful. After she left, I sat alone in the bookstore, processing what she'd told me. Vincent had been doing this for at least 20 years. How many victims had there been? How many women had suspected but couldn't prove it? How many had reported it and been silenced? The woman from 20 years ago was right. My prosecution of Vincent had brought justice not just for recent victims, but for everyone he'd ever exploited. That night, I updated my victim count database, 23 confirmed victims from recent years, plus however many from previous decades. The number could be in the hundreds. The book continued to generate speaking opportunities, consulting work, and connections with other advocates. I collaborated with legislators on federal privacy bills, with tech companies on ethical surveillance policies, with advocacy organizations on victim support. 6 years after the trial, I received a message from Agent Santiago, the FBI agent who'd helped build the case against Vincent. Thought you'd want to know. Vincent Kane's parole hearing was denied. He'll serve his full sentence. I felt relief and grim satisfaction. 18 years. He'd serve all 18 years. Thank you for letting me know. The impact of this case extended far beyond Kane himself, she wrote. We've used similar investigative techniques in dozens of other workplace surveillance cases. You helped establish the playbook. That was meaningful. My experience had become a template for investigating and prosecuting similar crimes. 7 years after the trial, I was invited to speak at the FBI's training academy, teaching federal agents how to investigate workplace surveillance and exploitation cases. It was surreal, standing in front of future FBI agents, teaching them strategies I'd learned through necessity and desperation. Victims of workplace surveillance often don't recognize it initially, I told them. They just feel uncomfortable, watched. They adapt their behavior without understanding why. Your job is to help them identify the surveillance, document it, and build prosecutable cases. I walked them through my experience, finding the files, documenting the evidence, working with the FBI to build the case. The key is moving quickly once the perpetrator realizes they've been discovered. In my case, Kane saw my access logs and knew I'd found the footage. We had to execute warrants immediately before he could destroy evidence. What would you have done differently? One agent asked. I would have involved law enforcement sooner. I spent nearly 24 hours with knowledge of Kane's crimes before contacting the FBI. Every hour was a risk that he'd discover what I knew and destroy evidence. If I'd called immediately after finding the files, we could have secured evidence even faster. But you were scared, another agent noted. Of course, Kane was powerful, wealthy, well-connected. I thought he might be able to make the investigation disappear. I didn't know if law enforcement would take a new employee's allegations seriously. What gave you the courage to come forward? I thought about that moment in my apartment, looking at the photos on my phone, making the decision to fight. I kept imagining more women being hired, being surveilled, being violated. I couldn't let that continue just because I was scared. The cost of silence was higher than the risk of speaking up. After the training, Agent Walsh, who'd led the original investigation, approached me. You've become one of our most effective advocates. Cases like Kane's are getting prosecuted more aggressively now because of the blueprint you helped establish. How many cases? 43 federal workplace surveillance prosecutions in the past 7 years. Not all with the same systematic pattern as Kane, but all involving illegal surveillance for personal or profit motives. 43 prosecutions, that's 43 predators stopped, and hundreds of victims getting justice. Your impact has been exponential. 8 years after I slapped Vincent Kane and called him a pervert, I was invited to speak at the same conference where Vincent had once been a keynote speaker. The irony was delicious. I stood on the stage where he'd once presented himself as an industry leader, and I told the truth about who he really was. Vincent Kane was respected, successful, well-connected. He had every advantage in life, and he used those advantages to exploit and violate vulnerable women for profit. His case demonstrates that predators don't look like movie villains. They look like successful executives. They have prestigious degrees and impressive resumes. They're charming and professional, until they're not. I talked about how I'd discovered his crimes, how I'd fought back, how systemic changes had resulted from his prosecution. But here's what I want you to remember. I was just one person. One new employee who couldn't stay silent. Each of you has that same power. If you see exploitation, if you discover wrongdoing, you have a choice. Look away or fight back. Fighting back is risky. It can cost you your job, your reputation, your peace of mind. But silence has costs too. The cost of knowing you could have stopped harm and chose not to. The cost of more victims suffering because no one spoke up. After the speech, I received a standing ovation. Later, the conference organizer told me, "That was the most powerful keynote we've ever had. Several attendees want to implement new surveillance policies at their companies based on your recommendations. Real change, tangible impact." That evening, I video called Jessa, Camila, and several other Titan survivors. 8 years, Jessa said. It's been 8 years since you walked into that office and everything changed. 8 years since we all fought back, I corrected. I found the evidence, but all of you came forward. All of you testified. All of you refused to protect Vincent's reputation. Do you ever regret it? Camila asked. The slap? The public confrontation? The years of media attention? Never. Not once. Do you? They all shook their heads. We got justice, Jessa said. Not every victim gets that. We're lucky. We're not lucky. We're survivors who fought for justice and won. There's a difference. As the call ended, I sat alone with my thoughts. 8 years since I'd walked into Titan Dynamics for what I'd thought would be a career-making job. 8 years since I discovered Vincent's surveillance operation. 8 years since I'd slapped him in front of everyone and called him what he was, a pervert and a predator. If only he'd known what he was starting when he gave me that admin access. If only he'd realized that handing me the keys to his surveillance operation would be his downfall. But predators like Vincent get arrogant. They believe they're untouchable, that their victims are too scared or too powerless to fight back. Sometimes they're right, but not always. Sometimes a victim finds the courage to slap back, to call out the predator in front of everyone, to burn down the entire operation and salt the earth where it stood. That's what I did. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That was my story. The story of how I slapped my new boss and called him a pervert after I found the truth. And how that single moment of rage and courage sparked a fight that would bring down a predator, deliver justice to his victims, and create systemic change that would protect countless others. If only more people had the courage to slap back when they discovered exploitation, the world would be a much safer place.